Hello and welcome everybody, it's Matt from Cloud Odysseys, and as requested, I'm finally doing an EDH updated video on my deck tech for Marneus Calgar. I played Marneus Calgar back well over a year ago, and I did a deck tech on it. This was in the J Controller Magic's league that they did. Every month the league kind of changed in like what the criteria was for that month, and I think this was like, you can do infinite combos and all that. It was fairly like CEDH-esque, but it was at a $500 budget. So as you see, this is at a $500 budget. I do have a unbudgeted version, which will be in the description. It's like $3,800 if you do proxies or whatever, or if you're just a baller. This is with the the dual lands and all of it, just everything you can think of that's expensive. Not necessarily because of this expensive, just because CEDH decks, and this isn't quite CEDH, but it's up there. I think it's got Thassa's Oracle, and it's got a lot of infinite win cons, and it's probably closest deck that I've ever made to CEDH if you want to look for that. And then if you're a CEDH guy, I don't know, you can tell me how I did. I'm not a CEDH guy. But then my name is Calgar, so just a quick a warning, I guess. It's hard to build Marneus without breaking him, and I do feel like this is a bit more of a sweaty deck than I normally build. Most of my decks are good, obviously. Like I think they're very strong. But there are infinite combos in this deck, so just a warning, I guess. But without further ado, let's get into the deck tech, and I'll explain every card and what they do. So, Marneus Calgar, he's the commander. It's in Esper colors. It costs 5 total mana to 3/5 double striker. And then whenever, it's got Master Tactician. Whenever one or more tokens you control enter, draw a card. And then Chapter Master for 6 colorless mana. You can create 2/2/2 white Astartes warrior creature tokens with vigilance. One of the cool things about Marneus is it has a draw engine built into it, and it also has an infinite mana outlet built into it. So this deck does have a couple ways of going infinite, mainly with Isochron Scepter and like doing mana rocks and tapping them for a bunch, then untapping the Isochron Scepter. And then you make a bunch of 1/1 tokens, draw your deck, and in the CDH version, of course, you can win with Thassa's Oracle that way. In this deck, it's more about beating them down with all of those tokens. There's like ways to take infinite turns as well. So, like I said, it's a bit sweaty of a deck, but I do think that there are cards in here that you can add to your decks if you're not that kind of sweaty. And you can kind of use it as a frame, take out maybe infinite combos if you'd like, and then of course use that as your, your platform, your skeleton of the deck. Next card, Adeline. This is a new card that I added into the deck. I think that Adeline alone is just super strong as it is, and I think that adding it into the deck is just kind of a nice engine for the deck. It's a 3 mana star 4, and it has vigilance, and its power is equal to the number of creatures you control. Typically you'll have a decent amount of creatures, but even if you don't, it's got vigilance, and whenever you attack, for each opponent you create a 1/1 white human creature token that's tapped at attacking that player or planeswalker they control. You're going to draw cards from that. You only draw 1 card per attack, but it's a nice little engine. Most of the cards you'll see are engines for Marneus. You're going to get a lot of value from playing him and having these cards in the deck. So you'll have a nice little engine going. And of course, like I said, Adeline is just strong on its own. You'll typically always have a way to attack with her, just like without having to worry about her safety, because it's a 4 power or 4 defense toughness creature is good enough, and in most situations you'll be able to find an attack, especially since the power will be so high that most of the time they won't really want to trade with it. And even if they do, you'll draw a card, you'll get a bunch of dudes. It's still good value. Displacer Kitten, this is another one of those infinite outlets. Displacer Kitten, just very strong. 4 mana 2/2 that has a thing called Avoidance. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, exile up to 1 target non-land permanent you control, then return that card to the battlefield under its owner's control. Typically with mana rocks that are mana positive, you can play them and then play something else. Flicker the thing you just played after you tap it for mana, and then you'll have infinite mana that way. As long as the mana rocks are mana positive, you just need 2 of them and then they'll go infinite. Displacer Kitten is just so strong. It can flicker itself. It's just, yeah. If you don't know what a Displacer Kitten does or what the power potential it has, play it and you'll find out. You've got Esper Sentinel. Esper Sentinel is a 1 mana 1/1. Whenever an opponent casts their first non-creature spell, each turn, draw a card unless that player pays X, where X is Esper Sentinel's power. Even at like just a 1/1, the tax of a 1/1, a lot of people just don't pay, so you'll end up just drawing cards that way. But there are ways to grow the creatures, so it can get larger, and then they typically can't pay or don't want to pay. So S Sentinel is just another engine, just a little kind of draw engine. Just slow the game down a bit, get to the mid-game. Marneus is a mid-game commander, for sure. He's not super fast by any means. Fairy Mastermind is another engine. This is more of a draw engine on its own. It's not necessarily paired with Marneus. It's just a strong card as it is. It's a 2-mana, 2/1 flash flying Fairy Rogue that whenever an opponent draws their second card each turn, you draw a card. And then you can pay 4 mana and each player draws a card. So if you do it on another person's turn, you'll end up drawing a card because they're drawing a card. Now be careful, obviously, you are giving each opponent a card, so you're only really gaining 1 card while they're gaining, well, you're gaining 2 cards while everybody else is gaining 1. So you're down 1 card technically. You know, it's fine. Marneus is a very strong commander, so it's just make sure you're not like just giving people a bunch of free cards. You want to use it strategically, typically before your turn. Grand Abolisher, because there are infinites in the deck, I like to have protection on my turn. Typically you cast like Silence or something like that. Grand Abolisher is basically a Silence. It's a 2-mana, 2/2 human cleric creature that during your turn, opponents can't cast spells or activate abilities of artifacts, creatures, or enchantments. It's just super nice to have. It just kind of keeps things... There are things that interact with you still. Cycling of lands, of course. Those get around Grand Abolisher. So be careful. You're not invulnerable during your turn by any means, but this does stop a lot of the shenanigans, and it lets you kind of do your infinite thing without too much of a worry. You've got Lotho, Corrupt Sheriff. This one is a new creature that I think will just add a ton of value. It's a bit of a value engine. Does combo well with Marneus. Yeah, it's a 2-mana, 2/1 legendary creature, Halfling Rogue, that whenever a player casts their second spell each turn, you lose 1 life and you create a treasure. Obviously, creating the treasure is just nice to have for mana, and then with Marneus, you'll draw a card, which is fantastic. In this case, kind of the theme. You're making tokens, draw cards. This is it's a token deck at its heart, you know? Mirko Bat's another one of those same kind of situations where you're just kind of benefiting from the creation and removal of your tokens. So it's a 4-mana 2/2 flyer that whenever you create or sacrifice a token, each opponent loses a life. This is basically just a win condition in itself. One of the infinite outlets that you have in the deck. You're creating a infinite number of the 2/2 Astartes Warriors, and then you can sacrifice them to a variety of things in the deck that what is it, altar? There's an altar that makes mana. That one. We'll get to it. But yeah, you'll just have a way to... And also just creating them just also does the same thing. You don't even have to get rid of them. Very strong card. Monastery Mentor. This card actually is like a little bit of a sleeper. This is an older card. But not like super old, but like I think probably before I built the deck. But yeah, 3-mana 2/2 creature, Human Monk. It has prowess. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, it gains 1/1/1/1. Don't really care about that. This secondary, I mean, it still matters, but the secondary ability is whenever you cast a non-creature spell, you create a 1/1 white monk creature token with prowess. A 1/1 with prowess, a token that you just create a bunch of, pretty dang good, especially if you're going infinite. There'll be infinite power, which is fantastic. But also with Marneus, you'll draw a card every time you create one of them. So every spell you cast, every non-creature spell you cast, will basically just be draw a card with Monastery Mentor, and then also make a token because it's just a lot of value. Good value engine. You've got Nadir Kraken. If you have infinite mana, this is a good way to get a ton of card draw. If not, then you just have a good, nice engine to draw cards. It's a 3-mana, 2/3 creature Kraken. Whenever you draw a card, you may pay 1 colorless mana. If you do, you put a 1/1 counter on Nadir Kraken and create a 1/1 blue tentacle creature token. So if you have infinite mana, the moment you draw a singular card, you can pay the 1 mana that Nadir Kraken says. If you do, you put a 1/1 counter on it, and then you create a tentacle. Then because you're creating a tentacle, you're drawing a card, which then you can pay the 1 mana and repeat that process over and over and over. Draw your whole deck, or just draw a bunch, make a bunch of dudes. Once you have your deck in your hand, you can do a ton of things. And of course, if you're playing the CEDH version, there's Thassa's Oracle. You could just play Thassa's Oracles if you want. You play Thassa's Oracle and you do this, and then you with that in the stack, you just boom, 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 infinite mana, do your thing, draw your deck, win the game. You can also do it with like the Laboratory Maniac, or there's the Jace as well. I don't have... There's a lot of different infinite ways, so just pick your poison, I guess. Orcish Bowmaster, very strong card. 2 mana for a 1/1 with flash. And then when it enters, and whenever an opponent draws a card, except for the first one, they draw each of their turns, or each of their draw steps. Orcish Bowmaster deals 1 damage to any target, and then amass Orcs 1. If it was just like the pinging of damage, it wouldn't be that big of a deal. I don't even know if I'd run it with Marneus, but the fact that you have the ability to flash it in, make a dude, which allows you to draw a card with Marneus, and then you can ping, then you get, like I said, you get the dude. If you have a way to sacrifice it, every time they draw, you get a new dude, then you draw. Just, ways to get more value. Nice little value engine. Of course, being able to ping something for one. It's basically removal for a lot of creatures. So it's nice to have. Also, you can ping people's faces as well. You've got Tivit, Seller of Secrets. This is more of the higher end game dude. He's a 6/6, flying, ward 3, legendary Sphinx Rogue. Council's Dilemma. When it enters or deals combat damage to a player, starting with you, each player votes for evidence or bribery. For each evidence vote, you investigate, which is creating a clue token. And then for each bribery vote, you create a treasure token. While voting, you can vote an additional time. The votes can be different choices for or the same vote. Like I said, this is more of just an end game, like a middle to late game commander like alternative. It's just nice to have the ability to create like a bunch of tokens, and it's got draw engine as well with the clues. And of course, the ward 3 and a flying 6/6 is nothing to scoff at. So very strong, versatile, and of course, because it's creating tokens, you're drawing with Marneus as long as he's on the battlefield. Every time you do the voting, I think it's only one time because I think you create all of them at once. But it's when he enters and when he attacks. So you'll get the vote, you'll get the value every turn. And if he has haste, that he'll get it when he enters and when he attacks. It was great. Now, there are a couple board wipes in this version, and I think maybe even in the CEDH Lite version or whatever you want to call it. But I've actually been going away from board wipes. I don't think that's necessarily the right call. So I left them in here. There are some board wipes in here. This one's a more versatile board wipe. It allows you to destroy one target creature. Can't be regenerated. Not that important. But you can overload it for the 4 mana, and then it destroys all creatures. Basically just, damnation. And yeah, I've been more focusing on my decks recently. I don't know, like I said, I don't know if it's right, but I'm more of just, I have more fun having a handful of cards that do a thing that I want the deck to do. And like a lot of times when I'm seeing like a board wipe and it's like it just seems to prolong the game, and like if it wipes everybody's field, it's kind of like, oh, it's so boring. I don't know. I just find like I'd rather go to the next game when somebody pops off rather than like just completely wipe the field, start over. I'd rather just start a new game. So that's kind of my thought process, but I've left them in here because I know that a lot of people still run board wipes. Now there are one-sided board wipes we'll get to, which I'm more in line with, like something like Cyclonic Rift, for instance. I'm cool with Cyclonic Rift because you're still winning the game. Your field is untouched, and like you set everybody else back, but you'll probably win like very quickly. So I'm cool with that. But like a straight up board wipe where it like wipes off everybody, and the person that did the board wipe has nothing, it's like can we just like, I'd rather just do a new game. Anyways, Demonic Tutor. This is just a tutor. 2 mana, tutor, sorcery. You can go get any card, put in your hand. Just very, very simple. Go get anything. Combo pieces, answers, whatever you want. Diabolic Intent, same thing, but you have to sacrifice a creature. That's it. It's the exact same thing as Demonic Tutor, but you have to sacrifice a creature instead, which you'll have plenty of tokens to do so. Now, this is one of the board wipes that I probably would still keep in no matter what, because it destroys all non-token creatures. A lot of your threats will be tokens, so I'm cool with this because you can use your tokens to help cast the spell. Normally it costs 7, but you can make it cost potentially free, depending if you have enough white tokens to pay for the 3 mana cost. And it only destroys non-tokens, so there's a good chance that you'll have a bunch of tokens left and nobody will have anything, hopefully. And then you can win with the tokens. So I'm cool with this. This is a very solid pseudo one-sided board wipe that actually progresses the game, and then it allows you to win. So I like that. Savine's Reclamation. This is just a very strong, just like a reanimator card, basically. It also gets your combo pieces back if they get removed, as long as it goes to the graveyard. But yeah, it's a 3 mana sorcery with flashback, and it has return target permanent card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. If this spell was cast from a graveyard, you may copy this spell, and you may choose new targets for the copy. Flashback costs 5. It's just a very nice, get combo pieces back, get value engines back. It's only 3 mana cost, but you'll see a lot of the really important spells or permanents are 3 mana or less, which is cool. Now, if you can't refuse, this is just a really, really good counter spell. Counter target non-creature spell, they create 2 treasure tokens. That's not that big a deal. Most of the time when you're countering a spell, counter the spell that's like game-changing. You don't be spiteful and like somebody goes to sword something. A lot of the times it's okay to just let your thing get sworded, especially if it's your commander. Just recast it. Unless you really desperately need your commander on the battlefield, of course, protect it. But a lot of times I'll hold my counter spells until I desperately need to use them. There's a lot of them in the deck, but you know, just don't be don't be a dick, I guess. It's kind of hard not to be with this deck, to be completely honest. It's a bit sweaty. Anguish Unmaking, 3 mana, instant, exile target non-land permanent, you lose 3 life. I like the ability to remove any non-land permanent and exile specifically because the One Ring exists. Stuff that's indestructible that you want to get rid of, this is just straight up exile. Anything you want, anything that's non-land, that's great. So you need effects like this. Swords to Plowshare, Path of Exile, those are all great. Those only target creatures. So I like this versatility of being able to do any, at instant speed, any non-land. So that's great. You've got Arcane Denial. This is just another counter spell. You counter target spell, its controller may draw 2 cards at the beginning of the next turn's upkeep, and then you draw 1 card at the beginning of the next turn's upkeep. This isn't the best counter spell because you're giving your opponent's draw, but if you have like you know, Fairy Mastermind on the battlefield, you'll draw an extra card from that, so you get a little extra value. This is just because it counters any spell, and it's only 2 mana, and it's like $1, so it's just nice to. It's just a very good budget, good card. And of course, just straight up counter spell, counter target spell, and it's just 2 blue for an instant speed. It's fantastic. We talked about Cyclonic Rift. If you don't know what it does, for 2 mana, return target non-land permanent you don't control to its owner's hand. Then if you overload it, you return all non-land permanents you don't control to their owner hands. So it's just like I said, it's basically a one-sided, not necessarily a board wipe, but if done at the right time, because it's instant speed, you could really cause somebody to have a bad day. If you bounce all their permanents at their end step, they have to discard down to 7 if they don't have a maximum hand size. So, or if they do have a maximum hand size. So yeah, very strong card. And of course, this could also just be a way to clear all the blockers off the battlefield so you can get in all with your tokens. One-sided board wipes like this, I'm completely cool with. I like it. Dark Ritual, this is just a way to power out some of your big bombs. It's just basically a pseudo mana rock because the deck is a little slow. Marneus is like a 5 mana commander. You wouldn't mind him being out there as soon as possible. So Dark Ritualing Marneus out there as soon as you can isn't a bad thing. Same thing with like Tivit, for instance. Getting him out there is super quick is nice. Delay, counter target spell. If the spell is countered this way, exile it with 3 time counters on it instead of putting it into its owner's graveyard. If it doesn't have suspend, it gains suspend, and then at the beginning of its owner's upkeep, they remove a time counter from it. When the last one is removed, they may play it without paying its mana cost. If it's a creature, it has haste. Delay is an interesting counter spell because most of the time they won't have any way to interact with it. There are ways to interact with those counters, but it's very rare. The thing that I like about most of it is like 3 turns is like a very long time. Like most of the time, that card is just basically gone. It doesn't go to the graveyard. It goes to the the exile zone or suspended zone, whatever zone that's in. I think it's exiled. Exile it, yeah. So they have no way to like reanimate it. For instance, look, like if you normally like counter like a commander, or I think they could probably still replace their commander to their command zone, but anything but their commander, it's typically hard for them to access that card once you delay it. So normally if you were to counter a spell, it would go to the graveyard. Maybe they just reanimate and they're like, who cares? This kind of gets around that, so it's got its ups and downs. It's just a way to delay the inevitable. Or you just delay it and then win the game. It's typically what happens. Dispel, just a really nice counter spell for instant spells. Counter target instant spell for 1 blue. Very cheap, very good value. A lot of instant spells are bad. You don't want them to target things you have, so this is just nice to have. Counter other targets, counter spells, stuff like that. Removal, whatever it is. Dovin's Veto, another good counter spell. You'll notice there's a lot of, this is like a kind of a control, it's a control deck. It's got a lot of removal and counter spells because you're trying to combo off, so typically you want to have ways to protect it. I might build a non-combo version of Marneus more focused around the tokens, the token generations. If that's something you guys are interested in, let me know in the comment section. But yeah, so this spell can't be countered, which is really, really nice. And then counter target non-creature spell. There's been a couple times where I've had Dovin's Veto in my hand and they played like really powerful creatures, and I'm like, that sucks. But most of the time it's fine. Dramatic Reversal. This is one of the combo pieces for Icecrown Scepter. It's 2 mana, instant speed, untap all non-land permanents you control. I wouldn't just cast this all willy-nilly. I would almost always only cast it if you're going to imprint it onto, or not cast it, but if you're to use it, imprint it onto an Icecrown Scepter. If you have to, if you're gonna like win the game because of it or whatever, and you can do the untap all non-land permanent control, or you can just cast it normally, that's fine. But I would like really try not to, or if you're gonna protect yourself from dying or whatever it is. This is it's just a combo piece, so try to use it sparingly. Enlightened Tutor, this is just a 1-mana instant that search your library for an artifact or enchantment card, reveal it, and then shuffle that, put it on top. So just before you draw, typically you want to do it at the end of somebody else's turn, and then you draw your thing for the turn. You're searching for like combo pieces. You can do mana rocks. You can even do like enchantments, like Rhystic Study in the higher value versions, or if you want to run Rhystic Study, of course. And plus, we'll get to the enchantments and artifacts section. I'll talk more about the Enlightened Tutor, what it can go grab. Limdual's Vault. This is a pseudo tutor. It's a very like long-winded way of just saying like keep looking at the top 5 cards until you like them, and then keep them on top. Shuffle the rest. That's basically what it says. But I'll read it exactly how it says. 2-mana instant. Look at the top 5 cards of your library as many times as you choose. You may pay 1 life. Put those cards in the bottom of your library in any order. Then look at the top 5 cards of your library. Then shuffle and put those last cards you looked at this way on top of it. So yeah, you're just basically trying to find your best 5 cards, and then you can put your last 5 cards you looked at. Put them in any order. Put them on top. Simple as that. You have to pay a life, 1 life every time you do that, but it's a way to like tutor for something and put it on top. And then you also get to like kind of like scry 4-ish, or like reorder the top 4. It's just a very versatile, good card. I think it's great. Mana Drain, very, very powerful counterspell. For 2 blue, you can counter target spell. At the beginning of your next main phase, add an amount of colorless equal to the spell's mana value. A lot of the things in the deck are colorless. There's a lot of artifacts. There's a lot of like high colorless casting creatures like Tivit, for instance. So having access, even Marneus is 5 mana, so getting an extra 2 mana for colorless makes them cheaper, and allows you to play more than a couple spells per turn, which is great. So yeah, just very solid counterspell. I would typically try to focus on getting something that has like 3, 4, 5, or 6 mana cost. I wouldn't really. It feels real bad to counter something that's like 1 or 2 mana. Sometimes you have to do it. It is what it is, but really try to get the most value. Honestly, sometimes even if the thing that I'm countering isn't even that like powerful, if it's like 6 mana, even if it's like a 6 mana vanilla 6/6, I'll probably just counter it just for the mana. Completely honest. It's a little bit of a dick move, but I mean that's 6 mana, you know. As long as you can use the mana, of course. Metal the Mixture. This is actually, it looks like a counter spell, and it kind of is. 2 mana instant, counter target instant or sorcery spell. It's rarely ever used as that because it has a transmute ability. So for 3 mana, you can discard this card. Search your library for a card with the same mana value as this card. Reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle. Transmute only as a sorcery. That sucks a little bit. This is mainly a tutor for your combo pieces. We talked about Icecrown Scepter earlier. Icecrown Scepter is 2 mana. Model the Mixture is 2 mana. So you're able to use this, transmute, go get your Icecrown Scepter. Boom, you've got a tutor for your combo piece. And the cool thing about it is that you can't counter it. You can stifle transmute, but you can't like counterspell transmute. You're not casting anything. It's almost like cycling. It's a cycling tutor basically. Very cool. So one way to kind of get around most counterspells is they can still counter the Icecrown, but either way. You got Mystical Tutor. Search your library for an instant or sorcery card. Reveal it, put it into your hand. Put that card on top. It's a 1-mana instant spell. It's mainly just to go get maybe like the Dramatic Reversal, for instance, or a counter spell if you need it, to protect your win or whatever. Just, you know, tutor. Tutors are tutoring things. Go get whatever you want, whatever you feel like you need. Negate, just counter target non-creature spell for 2 mana. Very simple. Most of the powerful things that you want to avoid are non-creature, so simple. Path to Negation, this is a free counter spell. Counter target spell. At the beginning of your next upkeep, pay 5 mana. If you don't, you lose the game. Don't do this if you can't pay the mana cost, unless you're like spiteful and really want to like, if you're countering somebody's stuff just to counter them and then lose the game, that's kind of a little feels bad. You can still do it if you want, but people are going to probably side-eye you a little bit, or be a little salty about it. But yeah, mainly here for protecting combo wins, because if you're comboing on your turn, as long as you can protect that combo and then just win the game, it doesn't matter about next turn because you're winning now. That's basically what Pact of Negation's in here for. So if you're not really going down that road, you can just remove Pact of Negation for something else. Path to Exile, it's a very solid 1-mana instant. Exile target creature, and they gain life equal to. They go get a basic land card and put it on the battlefield tapped. Just solid removal, 1 mana, very nice. You've got Swan Song, very solid counterspell. Counter target enchantment, instant, or sorcery spell. Its controller creates a 2/2 blue bird creature token with flying. The bird is whatever. Who cares? Nobody cares about the bird. It's just a very solid, very cheap, nice counterspell. Counters most things. Most things that matter, really. Swords to Plowshare, 1 mana, instant, exile target creature. Its controller gains life equal to its power. Again, most of the time when you're removing something, the life gain is such an inconsequential thing, it's not a big deal. Sometimes it matters, but most of the time it doesn't. Whir of Invention. This is another tutor for going to get like some kind of combo. The nice thing about this is that if you go get something like Isochron Scepter, when Isochron enters the battlefield, it has something called Imprint. So you could technically Whir of Invention and go get your imprinting spell and start the infinite combo on somebody else's turn, which is very interesting. Like in response to somebody trying to win, you can try to win on top of their win, which is, you know, kind of cool. But yeah, let's read what it does. 3 mana and X, instant, improvise. Your artifacts can help cast the spell. Each artifact you tap after you're done activating mana abilities pays for 1 mana. So it's kind of like Convoke for artifacts. Search your library for an artifact card with mana value X or less, put on the battlefield, then shuffle. So there you go. You can go Whir for whatever you want. Typically it's 4 combo pieces, but you could do Mana Rocks. You can do Esper Sentinel if you really want. Any artifact, go search for it. Arcane Signet, just a really solid mana, a really solid artifact, Mana Rock, and tap it, gain a mana. Simple. Whatever color identity you have. This is one of the altars we were talking about. Ashnod's Altar. Sacrifice a creature, add 2 colorless mana. A lot of the times you're able to, like, because Marneus' ability creates 2 warriors, when they enter the battlefield, if you have any kind of way to make just 2 more mana, you can, like, sacrifice both of them to create 4 mana. Or if you have a way to, like, discount his 6 mana activation ability to create 2, you'll just be able to, like, kind of cycle being able to, like, create and destroy your Astartes warriors with something like Ashnod's Altar. Or you can just use them as, like, a mana battery. Just sacrifice, if you have, like, 5 or 6 tokens, you know, like, you know, 10, 20 mana, and just use Ashnod's Altar as just, like, a big mana rock, basically. But most of the time it's used for combos. Zoria's Signet, just another mana rock. Basalt Monolith is a mana rock that, with like Displacer Kitten, for instance, you can go infinite with that. As long as the thing you're casting after it taps for, or it costs less than 3 mana, you can flicker bounce between the 2. Yeah, so just a nice mana rock here. Just like an infinite combo outlet. You can remove if you don't want to do any infinites. Another mana rock here, just solid mana rock. You can probably remove these signets. I think I meant to put in the ones that ping you with damage or tap for a colorless. I don't necessarily love these where you have to have a mana to tap it. So maybe in the deck list you'll see that they're different. Felwar Stone. Another one that I'm like, this one's pretty much okay. Most of the time it'll tap for the color you want, but it's a 2 mana artifact that taps for a land an opponent controls or could produce. Most of the time it'll tap for a color you need, but there are times where it kind of screws you over, and there are so many mana rocks nowadays where it's probably better to just remove them and replace it with something better. So maybe that changes in the deck list as well. But it's not bad. The reason why I left it in here is because, like, a lot of people still play Felwar Stone. It's not a bad, it's like 2 mana rock. It's great. It's just, it can mess you up, so if you don't like it, you know, you can remove it. Isochron Scepter, this is the one I've been talking about with the infinite dramatic reversal combo. Also, if you really wanted to, if you wanted to be that guy, you could put Counterspell underneath Isochron Scepter, any of the counterspells that cost 2 or less, and counter people's stuff, if you really wanted to. But yeah, Isochron Scepter, 2 mana artifact. It has Imprint. When it enters, you may exile an instant card with mana value 2 or less from your hand. Then you can pay 2 colorless mana, tap it. You may copy the exiled card. If you do, you may cast the copy without paying its mana cost. So if you noticed, Dramatic Reversal was a 2 mana spell. So you imprint it, and then you can pay 2 mana, untap all your stuff. As long as you have mana rocks that can pay the 2 colorless, you can just keep doing that over and over and over, because you're using Dramatic Reversal to untap the Isochron Scepter and all your mana rocks. Then they all tap. Boom, infinite mana. Simple as that. Very, very classic combination. All right, Lightning Greaves after that. This is very solid art equipment that just allows you to equip to any creature that gives it haste and shroud for 2 mana, and it has no equip cost. The thing that's great about this is that it's just mainly there for protecting your commander. Your commander obviously has a big target on its back when he's the source of your draw engine and your infinite, token generation, or even just not even infinite. It doesn't have to be infinite to be strong, obviously. He still creates a number of them. Every 6 mana you pay, you get 2 of them. 2/2/2s. They don't sound very, threatening, but when you keep doing it, you keep drawing cards, you're cycling through your deck, you know, you get strong. So yeah, just very solid to have. And you can move this around to like Tivit, for instance. There's nothing really in the deck that like targets your own stuff, so you don't have to worry about the Shroud. So yeah, nice. Lego Metal Torque. This is a very versatile, fun card. It's a mana rock, right? It taps for a colorless mana for 2 mana. You pay it, and then you just have a mana rock for 2, or for 1 rather. And then you can tap it to target non-land permanent, becomes an artifact in addition to its other types until end of turn. This thing, you know, it's interesting. If somebody does like a, I don't know, what's the one that destroy all artifacts? There's an overloaded one, destroy all artifacts. That one, you can make something an artifact and have that get destroyed as well. That's nice. Something like Meltdown as well. I can't think of the more popular one, but Meltdown is one I can think of. Destroys all artifacts or whatever. So stuff like that make things interesting. Maybe if you have something that gives your artifacts protection, of course, you can give something that's not an artifact becomes an artifact. Boom, nice. You know, it's versatile artifact, versatile mana rock that has some applications outside of making mana. Another Orzhov Signet. Again, this could be the one that pings you for damage if you take the mana. Otherwise, taps for colorless. Rings of Brighthearth. This combos with the Basalt Monolith as well. Basically, how it works is you tap the Basalt Monolith for 3 mana, and then you use the other mana that you would normally you have to have 2 other mana to activate Rings of Brighthearth. I'll read Rings of Brighthearth first. Whenever you activate an ability, if it isn't a mana ability, you may pay 2 mana. If you do copy that ability, you may choose new targets for the copy. The way that it works is that when you tap the mana, the Basalt for 3 mana, you can use the 3 mana that you used to tap it to untap it. As long as you have 2 other mana outside of that Basalt Monolith to start the combination, you can pay 2 mana as the ability to untap it with Rings of Brighthearth. You can copy that untapping ability. Because it's not a mana ability, you're just untapping the mana rock. So once you copy it, then you can tap it in response before the second untap happens, and you're gaining 3 mana. So once you start that combo, you have infinite colorless mana immediately. So of course, because, you know, Marneus has an infinite mana outlet, that's really great for colorless mana. You gotta have that. Gotta have that combination. If you don't want to do infinite combos, you don't run Rings of Brighthearth. Shortkai Genesis engine, very good value engine. Very good value engine. This is actually a really good commander on its own, just super strong value. 4 mana for an 8/8 vehicle, and it's 1. You can pay 1 mana, tap it, draw 2 cards, then discard a card. You create a 1/1 colorless pilot creature token. With this creature, crews vehicles as though its power were 2 or greater, and then it has crew 8. None of that matters. Honestly, in my head, I don't think I've ever crewed him. The only thing I've ever done was draw 2 cards, discard a card, create a dude. That's all you really care about. It doesn't even matter what the pilots do. You're almost never gonna attack with Shortkai. It's just the draw engine. Be able to create dudes with Marneus. You could draw another card. So you're basically drawing 3 cards, discard 1. It's just super good value. And of course, if you create enough of these pilots, you can just attack with them. You know, sure. And obviously, if you have infinite mana and if you have Dramatic Reversal combo, you'll untap Shortkai a bunch. You'll be able to draw through your deck and potentially win the game if you run Thassa's. You know, stuff like that. So yeah, very good value engine. Skull Clamp. We just talked about creating a bunch of 1/1 guys. It's nice to be able to Skull Clamp them and kill them. And of course, also, if you have infinite mana and if you have any of your Stardy Warriors, being able to create a bunch of them. If you need some way to, for some reason, to draw more cards, if you have no draw outlet, you can equip them to your Stardy's Warriors and sacrifice them to like Ashnod's Altar or whatever. It's just another way to do more infinite things. Or if you want to Skull Clamp some 1/1 pilots, it's just a way to draw 2 cards. It's an equipment for 1 mana. Equipped creature gets +1, -1. Whenever equipped creature dies, you draw 2 cards. So you're mainly trying to get value from the Skull Clamp. It's a combo piece. It doesn't necessarily have to be in there. It's kind of a flex spot, but you can get a lot of value from it. Soul Ring, very good mana rock. Sword of the Meek. This is another combination. This one's a bit more. It's a 3-card combo. It requires Sword of the Meek, Time Sieve, and one other card we'll get to. I forget. It's been a little while, but basically you need all 3 of them. Once you have all 3 of them, you have infinite life gain, infinite. Oh, Thopter Foundry. Infinite life gain, infinite flyers, infinite, basically infinite turns as well for Time Sieve. So yeah, Sword of the Meek is just a really solid combo. Well, once we get to Thopter Foundry, you'll see why, but just know that whenever... Oh, and with Skull Clamp, it also works with this as well, because you'll have an infinite number of Thopters. But it's equipment with 2 colorless mana. Equipped creature gets +1/+2, and you can equip it with 2. None of that really matters. What really matters is whenever a creature enters under your control, you may return Sword of the Meek from your graveyard to the battlefield, then attach it to that creature. That's what you have to remember. Anytime a 1/1 creature enters, if Sword of the Meek is in your graveyard, boom, goes to the battlefield, equips to that creature. That's what you have to remember. Talisman, these are the ones that you should probably more run. So maybe I'm running both. I do like the 2 mana rock. So maybe the Demir's ones are fine. Alright, so Thopter Foundry. So for 1 colorless mana, sacrifice a non-token artifact. Then you create a 1/1 blue Thopter artifact creature token with flying, and you gain a life. So remember that Sword of the Meek. If you have Thopter Foundry on the battlefield, every 1 mana you have, you sacrifice the sword, it hits the graveyard, you create the 1/1 blue Thopter Foundry, or you gain the life, and then because a 1/1 enters the battlefield, the sword's already in the graveyard, it sees it, boom, comes back. So every 1 mana, you get a 1/1, you gain a life, and then if you have Marneus, you draw a card. So being able to do that, even if it's not infinite, that's super good value, so very strong. And then of course they are artifacts, so if you have something like... No, not Thought Vessel, that's a mana rock. That's also a mana rock. Time Sieve. If you have something like Time Sieve, you just have infinite turns. As long as you have 5 mana with that combination on the battlefield, that's just infinite turns. Boom. Because Time Sieve says it is an artifact, and it says sacrifice 5 artifacts, take an extra turn after this one. So as long as you have 5 mana, you do the Thopter thing 5 times, the Sword of the Meek Thopter combo. You get 5 guys, you sacrifice the 5 guys, take an extra turn, start your new turn, do that again. You'll win because you'll have infinite turns. It's great. Wishcall Talisman, this is basically just Demonic Tutor that you have to pass to somebody after you use it. It has 3 counters on it, and you remove a counter, and then you pass it to somebody else tapped, and then they have... Once it only has a sorcery, or actually it's only during your turn. Right? Yeah, activate only during your turn. So not as a sorcery, it's during your turn, which is a bit different. And you have to gain control. You have to give an opponent control of it. I would typically only use Wishcall Talisman when you're going to try to win the game, because technically, giving your opponent a free tutor is not that good. So this is basically just like an extra demonic tutor that you're really just trying to win the game immediately. Don't just use it all willy-nilly, I guess. Unless you're trying to help. You can make deals with this. You can have the person, if you're like, hey, if I give you this talisman, you have to give it back, and then also do something else. Like, be like, and the thing that you go tutor can't affect me. Stuff like that. Because you're in full control. Just don't use it if they're not going to take the deal, Or only use it when you're going to win. Caretaker's Talent, one of the new cards from Boomburrow. Very strong. 3 mana. It's an enchantment that has whenever 1 or more tokens you control enter, draw a card. This ability only triggers once each turn. You're pretty much always going to be able to take advantage of that. Because it triggers only once each turn, there are ways for you to get, make tokens on other people's turns. You can draw cards, which is great. You can level it up to level 2, create a token that's a copy of target token you control. That's just kind of good value. And then pay 4 mana. Creature tokens you control get +2/+2. That's just a way to close out the game. It's mainly there for the value for the drawing of cards each turn, but it does have a bunch of other value everywhere else. You've got Mystic Remora. This is a nice... it's basically like Rhystic Studies, but like way harder to pay for, and it has cumulative upkeep. So 1 mana enchantment, cumulative upkeep 1. Basically, at the beginning of your upkeep, you put an age counter on it, then you have to sacrifice it unless you pay whatever the mana value of the age counters you have. So if you have 1, you have to pay 1 mana, or else it goes away. And it has whenever an opponent casts a non-creature spell, you draw a card unless that player pays 4. It's most of the time they're almost never going to pay for Mystic Remora. If you get this out on turn 1, 2, or 3, they either have to play around it or they play into it, and you just draw a bunch of cards. I wouldn't even be like, honestly, if people are trying to play around it, and if you keep hitting your land drops, I would honestly just keep playing it. Somebody's going to fold, you're going to draw a bunch of cards. Once one player folds, the rest are going to be like, oh, I guess he's going to do it, so I'm going to keep drawing. So you basically just keep paying the cumulative upkeep. As long as nobody's really getting ahead, there's no reason for you to fold, unless they're playing a bunch of creatures and just killing you, then just let it go. Smothering Tithe, very, very, very strong card with Marneus because you're creating a token every time somebody draws a card unless they pay 2. It's an enchantment for 4, by the way. So whenever they draw a card, an opponent draws a card, if they don't pay 2 colorless mana, you create a treasure, which means you'll draw a card with Marneus. A lot of the times, if you have Marneus and Smothering Tides on the battlefield, you are in a super good position. So, enjoy it. Academy Ruins, we're into the lands now. Because it is a fairly artifact-centric deck, Academy Ruins is a very solid artifact card to have in here for land type. You can pay 2 mana, put target artifact creature from your graveyard on top of your library. This is a way to get one of your combo pieces back, or say, I don't know, I guess if a mana rock gets destroyed and you really need it, put it back on top. Or just tapping it. Doesn't even have to sacrifice the land. It's just that good. Attica Waste, just a dual land. Ancient Den, artifact land. There isn't anything that I can think of necessarily a reason why you necessarily need to play the artifact lands. There's no like Mox Opal or anything like that. So it's not like super needed. You could just play a basic in its place, to be honest. If you're like worried about like your artifacts being destroyed. Castle Ardenvale. This is just a way to make a token on somebody else's turn. It's expensive, but you'll draw a card as well as long as you have Marneus on the battlefield. But it enters the battlefield tapped unless you control planes. It taps for white, and then you can pay 4 mana, tap it to create a 1/1 human creature. Like I said, it ain't great. It ain't good value, but the deck allows you to gain more value than, like for instance, the Caretaker's Talent. You'll be able to draw a card from that. If Marneus on the field, you'll draw a card from that. It makes it a better value as opposed to just paying 4 mana and, getting nothing. Well, getting a 1/1. Basically nothing. This is basically a dual land that pings you. Dual land, but it enters the battlefield tapped unless you show them a swamp or an island. Command Tower, we all know what Command Tower is. This is another kind of dual land. We have to pay a mana to activate it. I don't love these lands, but like honestly, like in the $500 category, the lands are like not great. That's the reason. One of the things that makes the no budget Marneus better is that like you just get to play all the busted lands, and it makes it so much easier. You could just play basics in place of these lands if you don't like them. I'm trying to play all the decent dual lands, but like the check lands, they care about like the number of basics you have. You can't really play those because you don't run enough basics. So the mana base is a little sketch. But you also play enough mana rocks to make like paying for this, for instance, not that big a deal. The mana base could be edited maybe a little bit better. I haven't built the deck yet, full disclosure, to test this. So once I get around to doing that, yeah, hopefully it'll be better, or it might be just fine the way it is. Deserted Beach, another check land that's just dual land. This is kind of a whatever land you need, but again, this is like that situation where most of the time it'll tap for what you need, sometimes it won't. It adds a mana of any color that a land could produce of your opponents. Dual land here that just checks for plains or islands. You got some dual lands here that you have to ping. Pain lands, another ping land. Pain land or ping land? I think these are pain lands. Inventor's Fair. So legendary land at the beginning of your upkeep. If you control 3 or more artifacts, you gain 1 life. I guess that's the one reason to keep the artifact lands in, for the extra life gain. Most of the time, to be completely honest, I forget about the 1 life. Taps for 1 colorless. You can pay 4 mana, tap it, sacrifice Inventor's Fair, search your library for an artifact card, reveal it, put it into your hand, and shuffle. Activate only if you control 3 or more artifacts. Again, you're trying to tutor for these infinite combos like I mentioned before, so having a land that does that is fantastic. It's like fairly easy to turn on. Basic Island. Isolate Chapel's just dual land. Marsh Flash is a fetch land. Morphic Pool is a dual land. Plains, another dual land here. Ruffian's Tower, obviously you have to play the Triumph. Triumphs are fantastic. Actually, another thing that you could probably put in here, maybe if you have access to more fetch lands as well, take out some of them and run the Surveil lands. The Surveil lands are pretty dang good. Reliquary Tower, you do draw a bunch of cards. It's nice to have no maximum hand size. Not required, but it is nice. Another dual land, artifact land, dual land, more lands. None of these are anything special. And then I think these are in the sideboard or considering. Yeah, these are in the considering. So these are more the like I said, more of the board whips that I don't typically play, but you could technically use this in a way that like doesn't affect you much. So this is kind of one of the one-sided board whips. So consider it, I guess. That's why it's in the considering. Fel the Mighty, 5 mana, destroy all creatures with power greater than target creature power. So you can kind of control what you destroy. Keep all your tokens, but destroy everything that's bigger than them. That's nice. Launch the Fleet. I remember this being one of those cards that are like, It seems like super fairy tale land, but it could be super strong. But it's a 1 mana Strive. This spell costs 1 more to cast for each target beyond the first. Until end of turn, any number of target creatures each gain. Whenever this creature attacks, create a 1/1 soldier creature token that's tapped and attacking. It's basically like an Adeline. Turns one of your creatures into like a juiced Adeline, or turns all of your creatures into juiced Adelines. And each one of the creatures that you target that would be attacked and attacking would be separate triggers for Marneus. So you draw a bunch of cards. So launch the fleet could be interesting, but the thing that it's, you know, it's like I said, it's kind of fairy tale land, but it could be fun. And then, of course, Martial Coup. The nice thing that's nice about this is that it is a board wipe, but if you pay enough mana, especially if you have infinite mana, you're destroying all their creatures and you're creating a bunch of tokens that hopefully will win the game. So stuff like that. Like I said, I like the less than one-sided board wipes. So very long deck tech, but like I said, I like to explain all the cards in detail and explain what they're used for. So hope you guys enjoyed. Hope it explained all the decks. A little scatterbrained sometimes, I think, but I get excited, you know. And of course, in the description below, there will be the non-budgeted version of Marneus as well. There's a bunch of new tools within the last year that's come out of Magic the Gathering. So that's cool. So thanks for watching, everybody, and we'll see y'all in the next one.